Welcome back to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast. We are now at halftime of season 5, and we got a pretty cool little halftime show for you today. We're gonna be doing well. First of all, I get my brother Paul back in the studio. It's our virtual studio that we get to have here back together. Paul, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be back together online. Got to spend some time together in person, which is unusual for us back with the United Soccer Coaches Convention. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But that was cool to spend just some face-to-face time as opposed to this online version of each other. But this is always fun to get back on the podcast with you too.
Absolutely. I'm kind of sick of saying, Paul wishes he could be here because, I wish you could be there too. So this is always cool. And so that is one of the things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the United Soccer Coaches Convention, which was a great few days for me, and I know for you as well. So we're going to get into that a little bit. We're going to just do a quick rundown of the episodes that we had in the first half of this season. And we're going to finish up our conversation of Ted Lasso season 1. We took a little break from that in that season 4 post-match show. If you remember, that conversation was our exclusive interview with Paul about his decision to step down from Baylor Soccer. And since then, Michelle Leonard has been named that new head coach there. And we put up that interview with Michelle just to remind you about her. So we got a lot of stuff going on since the end of season 4. So why don't you just, Paul, just share a little bit about that, the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and what was it for you, man? I mean, I can speak for myself in a few minutes, but what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a little bit different this year. I've gone in the past as a college soccer coach, and the convention itself doesn't. It lends itself to coaches of every level. There's something there for everybody, and you can always go in and grab something. Obviously, if you're open-minded, which if you weren't, you wouldn't go to the convention to begin with. But
Right.
Probably not the most beneficial from a college coach perspective. There's more. I guess I'll say it this way: there's more there for the club side and some of the other things. So me going in not as a college coach this time gave me a different perspective on the convention. And I'm a huge fan of the convention. I've been a member of United Soccer Coaches for I don't even know how many years now, but big proponent of the convention, but seeing it a different perspective this year. And for me, a little bit more networking than normal, and learning more about a lot of other things that are going on within the game, just because my perspective is open a little bit more, not as narrow as it has been over the last 20 years as being a college soccer coach. So saw it in a different light, and it was great. Really enjoyed it. Enjoyed obviously our time together to network and connect as well. But always a great time. Always pick up things from the convention that can be used from a coaching perspective or a leadership perspective. Always run into people that you talk to a lot but don't see very often. So putting some faces together, and but all in all, just a great time, and you come back kind of rejuvenated and excited about kind of what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're working on something as well that you share a little bit. I don't know if you're wanting to share that here a little bit about one of the next steps that you're wanting to do, and you're able to share that with some people out there. If you want to share that now, I'd love to have you kind of just share a little bit with the coaches out there and the different people out there, what you're wanting to be doing on the consulting side.
Yeah, we're excited, reaching out to and been reached out from some clubs around the country just about using our experiences from college coaching over the last 20 years to kind of give a different perspective and help some clubs navigate what's best for their players as they're trying to prepare for the college game. Whether that's helping them navigate the recruiting process or just being physically and mentally ready for the college game as best they can. So really just kind of opened up our resources to some clubs to say, hey, we're available. We'd love to help however we can. And it's not there's no cookie cutter program that we've put together because every club is different. Every player has different needs. Every coach has different needs, and just kind of open up ourselves as resources to some clubs out there that are willing to work with us. So we're excited about that. We've seen some great traction on that, and it started before the convention, and then gained some more traction during the convention as well. So it's been fun to see that kind of grow, and it's always fun to share experiences that you've had to help grow the game and help younger players and younger coaches along the way.
Yeah. So I mean, and I'd agree with you as far as the need for that. There's a lot of, I mean, talk about misinformation all the time, right? In different settings, but there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of things that are going on out there that we're just, we need folks like you who have, been on that side of it, and to be able to speak truth into that, and just your vast, knowledge of the game as well. And your wife playing at the national team level, you playing in college as well. I mean, those are things that are those kind of those intangibles that you bring to the table that I think if you're interested in that, you can just reach out to jobsandsoccer.com, right? Because is that where they can learn more about that?
Yep, they can go to jobsandsoccer.com, or they can email me right now at pajobson@gmail.com. And I think also just the resources we have too at our disposal. It's a difficult conversation between club coach and college coach. Every college coach wants to be helpful, but there are obviously some compliance restrictions with the NCAA of how you can work with different players. There's fear of allegiances with clubs that keep you from being able to maybe work with other clubs. But now that I'm out of the game, I have no allegiance to anybody really, other than who might be able to benefit most from our experience. So kind of a connection piece, I think, even between clubs and the college coach resources that are out there at my disposal as well. So, But yeah, jobsansoccer.com right now is the website. Eventually that's going to transition into warriorwaysoccer.com, but we're probably a couple of weeks away from revealing that. But jobsansoccer.com, they can reach out to us through there.
Now you've revealed it to the whole world, Paul. So it's
the whole
revealed.
World.
It's revealed
it's
now.
There. It's out.
So, and just to be clear, you still have allegiances to Marcy and your kids and to God and some other people.
Those type of allegiances.
Yeah,
we're just talking.
I just wanted to clarify.
Club and college allegiances.
I just want to make sure people knew you didn't just fly off the reservation after leaving Baylor. You just weren't like, running naked through the streets and stuff, So
no, that's not happening.
We won't go there. Sorry for the visual folks. I didn't even mean to say that, but that happens, folks. That happens. You don't know what you're going to get because we aren't scripted. We just throw the stuff out there and it happens. But hey, I agree. Like I said, with the conference, a great place. One of the things I loved is just being able to meet people that I'd only met on Zoom, like some of the guests from the show, some of the people that we were able to meet on Clubhouse, some of the folks that I've just been able to connect with over the kind of COVID lockdowns and all these other things, not being able to do the convention last year. It was my first convention, which was pretty cool. So, I just enjoyed meeting people. I just love meeting people, connecting people to different people. I was able to connect you with some people, which is kind of funny, given the fact that you've been in this a lot longer than I have. You obviously connected me with people too, which I absolutely love. And then we were just able to, you just sit in a bar and hang out, and people come and you meet people and at the different meetings. And we went to the faith-based advocacy meeting and met some great folks there, and just seeing the great things that are going on, these initiatives, these people that are innovative, going through the exhibit hall and seeing, there's a lot of gimmicks, there's a lot of things there, but there's a lot of really cool innovations going on. And you and I were able to have a great conversation on Don Williams' podcast. That's our, SRUSA, their podcast, Inside College Soccer. And with Christian DeVries, who, Christian and I were able to talk about our Coaching the Bigger Game program with a lot of people there as well. Again, coachingthebiggergame.com if you want more information about that. Love to talk with you about, it's really just helping you if you're a coach, or if coaches out there who really are, want to learn a lot more and be able to be a lot better on the people side of the game. It's funny. I just saw the clip, and we're going to talk about Ted Lasso later in the show, but I guess the United Soccer Coaches gave the Believe Award. They said it's the first and probably only Believe Award. And they gave it to Brett Goldstein, who, AKA Roy Kent. And it was funny where he was talking about how, he loves being able to coach and, curse at the kids. And he doesn't know how other coaches can do it without using profanity. But it was, you know, it's pretty funny. Obviously, it was in jest. But one of the things he did say is he said, you know, the stuff that you're teaching these kids on the he didn't say the people side, but that's effectively what he was talking about, is much more important than the tactics. And I agree with that. You know, in the big picture, you know, 1%, you know, are going to go and play, or maybe like 7% will go play somewhere in college. The other 93%, man, this is just life lessons. That's why we're doing this show. That's why we talk about what we talk about here. And so I saw a lot of people talking about that. I mean, I heard a lot of people talking at the convention about that. So I encourage you, if you are a coach and you haven't been, you know, think about going. I mean, it's an investment. Yeah, it's time, it's money, it's all that. But I think some of the conversations you get to have with people, they're not only encouraging, but I think they'll give you things to be able to take back to wherever you're coaching and really be able to pour into your kids at whatever age, kids, college, high school, youth, even pro coaches. We all have stuff to learn. So it's that learning humble posture. If you have that, it'd be like a kid in the candy store there. So any last thoughts on that before we move on?
Nope. I would also say the same. I just encourage you, if you're a coach, I would join United Soccer Coaches. There's a lot of great resources and benefits out there. One of them being the convention as well. And yeah, like you said, it just being connected to other coaches is important. It's encouraging. But I agree with you. You know, it was interesting how many folks were talking about the people side of things, you know, that I think we're starting to tilt back that way. I think we're starting to see the importance of, you know, growing the game the right way is going to be done through treating people the right way. And the program that, you know, you guys are putting together and have put together for coaches and whatnot is going to be a really important piece of that. And I think you got a lot of great response for the folks you were talking to about that program too. So that was encouraging, and definitely would encourage folks to get on board with that, to get on board with United Soccer Coaches. They're not paying us for that advertisement either, by the way.
I don't think so. I might reach out to them after the fact and see what we can do, but I
maybe
don't
just
think,
a position on Podcast Row next year.
maybe. Yeah. There's clearly not a paid advertisement. It was just something that we, you know, liked what they did. It was good stuff. So, all right. So let's go to, well, first of all, I just want to give a little sneak preview into because one of the guests that I just interviewed, actually I interviewed him yesterday, was one of the people talking about the people side of the game. Is Jay Demerit, it's an amazing story, documentary, Rise and Shine. I strongly recommend it. For all ages. You could watch it with your kids. I watched it with my 10-year-old, and he was inspired by it. He actually, little teaser, he asked a couple questions, not actually asked them, but he told me some questions he wanted to ask Jay after watching that documentary. So I worked those into the interview. So that was kind of fun. Boy, but he talked about self-leadership. The next half of this season 5, we have a couple interviews I've already done. We have a couple I'm not going to say because I'm not sure if we're going to get them, but David Rika, who is a 9/11 survivor, he basically had PTSD and used soccer to help him through the trauma. And so just an amazing story. That one, it blew me away. And then Jay Demerit, great conversation with him as well. His story is one of a kind, and but a story that can inspire other stories that will be like it. It won't be the same story, but other stories like it for people to you know, push through that adversity. And so I encourage you to listen to those, and also listen to if you haven't already, the great conversations we were able to have in the first half of this season. Before the season started, if you haven't listened to the 20 memorable moments of 2021, I encourage you to do so, because that's a great little, as I say, a sampler platter. That is something you can give to your friends who don't know about the show, and that you're like, hey, this is helping me out. Here's just something to check out, little clips, 3-4 minute clips. Some are 1 minute clips from last year, just the highlights. I say highlights, I mean, there's so many highlights. These were some of the moments that we chose of the so many that we could have chosen. And so go check that out. And then, Paul, I'm going to come to you right now because I've talked for too long in this little blurb. But what were some of the highlights from you or for you in the first half of season 5?
Well, yeah, just to piggyback on what you're saying, I'm looking forward to. This was a great half of the season, obviously with the interviews you did, and I would highly encourage that. The 20 moments as well that came together really well, Phil, and I think it is a great opportunity to put that in front of other people, say, hey, this is kind of what they're doing, and even just some great reminders of some top moments through the year. But the Jay Demerit story, that's going to be amazing. I'm sure that interview is going to turn out really, really well. A great story, just a great motivational story for sure from him. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. It's a great little teaser for next season. But these last 4 episodes were really good. Going back to the very beginning, I thought with Cheryl McCormick, I thought that was a really good interview. I think I'm always kind of interested in the lifelong, I call them career students. I think she's a career student. She's always learning. And of course, we're all always learning, but she's doing it at a more intense level of the different things that she's involved in and creating a craft around how to hone all these things together to help people through things. So I'm always interested in that and interested to see kind of where she ends up with all of that. She wants to teach and wants to do things like that as well. So I'm excited to see where she's going to do that. And I will always inspired as well, because she's a wife and a mom and homeschools and navigates that hits home with our household as well. So I love hearing stories like that and things that they're doing and navigating, because I think there's too many people out there that feel like, hey, I just don't have time. No, you just don't have, you just haven't prioritized your time very well.
Right.
While I don't think you guys talk about that in the interview, that's something that kind of hit me. I'm like, she's doing all of this, going to school, teaching people, consulting people, raising her boy. I think that she has 2 boys or something like that.
Yep.
And a husband who's gone quite a bit because he serves in our military. But I thought that was a great start to this season or half the
Paul,
season.
I'm going to interrupt you for a sec, because right there is why you need to be on these interviews, because that would have been a great question. Now I'm bummed I didn't ask that question, and now it's something that everyone's gonna be bummed, and they're gonna think, oh man,
you can't ask all the questions. I mean, come on, like maybe you wouldn't have been able to ask the cheerleading question.
That's
There's
true.
a tease if you haven't heard the episode. Go back and listen. That was
a fantastic question.
It was great. It created some great discussion on that. But yeah, so enjoyed that a lot with her. Just to start there. So.
Yeah. So one of the things that's kind of behind the scenes, this half of season 5 had a couple of the people that we met on Clubhouse. So we've talked about kind of revamping the Clubhouse conversations that we were having before, but Aaron Locks, who was the 4th interview, and Cheryl were both Clubhouse connections, which is kind of fun, right? Again, those are two people that I've never met in person, but I feel like they're friends now because we've connected. Obviously not the same as you and me, but right. I mean, that's a whole different level, because we've connected and been able to do life together more, but to be able to do that, and then, hopefully we will be able to meet somebody in person, but it was kind of fun to have those connections. But Cheryl, I agree with you. I mean, it's just, it comes from a different side, right? I mean, she's never played soccer, but she's thinking about these issues at deep levels, and really, the mental health side, it cracks me up. I mean, she doesn't lack for confidence either. That's for sure, man. I mean, she's coming in and saying, I know what I know, and I want to help you with it. And I love that, because so many people are like, no, I don't have the ability. I don't know much. And it's not a false humility of some people. I just think some people just are not confident in who they are and the gifts they've been given and the abilities they have. And, I always talk about, the fact that we're made for greatness, and we have great works that we were created to do. And if we don't do them, then no one will do them. Yeah. And so we need to understand that we are made uniquely for certain things. And that was what, I mean, she didn't say that per se, but that came out of it for me, where she's got these things to give, and she's getting, again, going back to innovation, she's being innovative in how to deliver them. And it's working, and it's helping people, which is something that I think is a great lesson for all of us. So
yeah, and I think I leaned into the, her kind of coaching coaches. I thought that was important. And there are a lot of programs out there for health and wellness for the student athlete or for the athletes, but there, and some of the things that you guys are creating to help coaches is important. It's a missing piece. So I enjoyed some of the talks and conversations that she had about how she's helping coaches. She's coaching coaches, and again, it's not about sport, right? It's just about how are you taking care of yourself and creating health and wellness programs for these coaches, because Marcy and I talk about it quite a bit. If you're a coach and you're a coach who pushes fitness, and you're not fit as a coach, it's hard as a player to look at you and go, why are you telling me to get fit? Even though I'm not competing as a coach, I think there's some credibility there. And I think the same thing from a mental perspective. Being a mentally healthy coach is the best way to help your players be mentally healthy. So she hit on some of those things that were kind of hot buttons for me as a former college coach, where I think we're missing some opportunities to help coaches in some of those areas.
Yeah, we definitely, I think we make assumptions, and what happens when you assume, but that coaches are healthy just because they're the coach. I don't know why we make those assumptions, but we assume that. And I would say when Patrick Lencioni was interviewed about how many organizations in the country are healthy, and he said about 15% maybe. Mm-hmm. And I'd probably say that's probably, unfortunately, close to the amount of coaches who are healthy mentally, physically, emotionally, because it's a brutal job, as you know, right? It's a lot of time, energy. You're continually thinking about it. I know just with high school, where we're not recruiting, we're not on the road, we're not doing these things. I'm thinking about it all the time. Like, how can we get these girls to do this? How can we, and I'm not even the one doing the practice plans and all that. But I'm constantly thinking about how, what's wrong with her? What's going on? What's going on underneath the surface? Like, because again, even with the people side, if I'm not healthy myself, there's no way I can enter into that. There's no way I can enter into that. So that was really cool. We could talk for another hour about that, but let's move on to kind of Tony. And the one thing that stuck out to me, and it's why I put it on the clip that we released, was that idea of walking soccer.
Yeah.
And just the again, innovate. I love, if you can't figure it out, I love innovation. That's kind of the theme for this one, I guess, is this idea of innovation and being able to take these concepts and say, okay, here's a lesson I want to teach, which is what we do on the show, right? How can the game teach us lessons? But he's taking it one step further and saying, all right, let's kind of tweak the game a little bit to teach some lessons. And so what do you think about Tony and that, or other things from that interview that stuck out to you?
Yeah, no, the walking soccer thing was really, really cool. And I've seen that before, but had totally forgotten about it. And that's the great thing about these interviews and even the convention, or just reconnecting with coaches, that they're, sometimes as a coach, you've forgotten more than some people know about the game sometimes. But I think that walking soccer thing and how he utilizes that, I'm thinking about even my own kids. That's something that I had forgotten years ago, but even with my own kids, as we're, working with younger kids and my own children, that self-control, aspect of things and incorporating that into the game was great. Now I'm listening to it and remembering that drill, or whatever you want to call it, realizing how frustrating it is as a coach to implement walking soccer.
Right.
But it can be such a beneficial thing if you've got the patience to no pun intended, to walk through it. Right. It can be frustrating, but it can be very rewarding. And that stood out to me for sure. And I just really liked, his approach to the game. It just seems very, calm about things, and just has a great approach to people. Right. And seems to really handle that really well, to where the concept, sometimes as coaches, we can get our idea of what we're trying to accomplish can get in the way of actually doing the things we need to do to get there. And I think he seems to have that kind of figured out a bit, I would say, to not let that get in the way.
Absolutely. So go check that one out for sure. And then so Tony's a guy who's taken what he's learned from the game and using it with Pure Game nonprofit to be able to help vulnerable youth in Orange County, and also is now a life coach as well. And Robbie Handy, the next guy that we had in the third interview, he was a William Jessup University in Yuba College and head coach there, and he just decided I want to go help others, and he's now a health and wellness coach. And so, this kind of the theme for this half. It was kind of unintentional, but We have these people who are using the sports. I mean, a lot like, again, what we're talking about on the show, in their different coaching that they're doing of others in different ways. And so Robbie was a guy that I met again on Facebook. We happened to coach at the same school at different times, which is kind of cool. Boy, I love the conversation. Just it seems like, if we lived down the street from each other, we'd be good buds.
Yeah.
But beyond that, he's a guy that I think has a lot to offer. And I know in that interview was really, it's called winning with character. And that's really just was the theme throughout how we can go about doing that. And I know a couple people have actually reached out saying, how do you do it? How do you have it be a both and not an either or? And so anyway, what did you think of that interview, and just anything that stood out to you in that conversation?
Yeah. Selfishly, I enjoyed it just because, he kind of went through his transition of having been, a college coach and coached at some different schools and had some different experiences, and felt, he and his wife felt like God were pushing them in a different direction. So that hit home with me, right? Because that's kind of what
It
I've just
sounds a
been
little
through.
familiar.
Yeah, it's a little familiar. So I was encouraged by that, and I hope that this podcast can be that. That every episode is going to hit somebody a little bit differently. It's not, a cookie cutter thing that every episode is going to be the end all be all for everybody. But hopefully, different episodes are going to hit different people. And this one hit me for sure. Just his experience and how they really just trusted what they felt like God was leading them to do, and at times stepped out of comfort zones, and people thinking that they were crazy to do certain things or whatever, I'm sure, to take them even out to Nashville, right? Leaving home. And I don't think that's what we're doing, but a big step of faith to even, pick up and move. And so that was encouraging from my standpoint. But I think it also shows the lessons that you can learn through the game, whether you're a player or a coach, how it really does transcend. And I've talked to a lot of coaches just in my transition who are like, man, I'm considering a move. I'm just not sure that I could do anything else. And I think that this is an episode that doesn't talk specifically in this detail, but as a coach, you form a lot of experiences, and you handle a lot of things that translate really well into other avenues. So not saying everybody needs to jump out of coaching. I think a lot of people need to stay in coaching because it's good for the kids, but that should never be a resistance. And I think he kind of proves that a bit, and that he's a very versatile person and is still developing people and helping people as he was as a college coach. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. And he's the real deal. I mean, that's the thing about these folks, is they're not just saying a bunch of stuff on a podcast. Like, they're living it out. If you go, look at their social media stuff. If you go, and obviously social media is self-selected what they put on there, but the conversations there, maybe behind the scenes here, these folks are living out what they're talking about, which is great. And yeah, I didn't even think about that. I should definitely, you need to connect with Robbie, and you guys can probably encourage each other on many levels. So the last one, Aaron Locks, is the dude who's just a fun guy. I mean, man, I love talking with him because I learn more and more about his background and who he's been able to work with over the years. And he just throws out names like they're just, hey, it's Bill down the street, but it's actually Pat Riley, or John Wooden, who he worked with for a decade or so, or Bernie Bickerstaff, or these other guys who are, some of the big time basketball. He's obviously a basketball guy at this core, but he has a National Academy of Athletics now, which is basically, what Diego Bocanegra and I talked about, really kind of giving youth soccer, giving youth sports back to the kids, and really the coaches are college students, and we're able to create these environments where the kids can get out and just play again. Talk, teach, play is what his curriculum is for these coaches that they train up. And so it's almost like back to the, Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA, and, going back to this, like, hey, how can we teach these things through sport? And, obviously like-minded with us on how we can do these, and what are the real lessons. And I know you've had some conversations with Aaron on Clubhouse as well. And, He's just a guy with well, I talked with him as I did with Corey Close, because anybody who was like be able to be mentored at any level by John Wooden, I feel like that's how we keep the legacy going. Tonight my daughters and I are going to a survivor of the Holocaust talk here in Folsom, and it's a second one that they're doing, and every single time those people who have survived the Holocaust, when I've heard any of them interviewed, they say, keep telling our story, because if you don't, then it's going to fade away and it will be forgotten and we might repeat it. And I think that is obviously a completely different issue, completely different. I'm not comparing the two at all.
No.
But the idea of these people who were really kind of just, they blazed a trail that we can learn so much from. And John Wooden is one of those guys. And I think we need to keep telling his story, because the way he did it, he did win with character, right? To go from that Robbie Handy episode title, like, and how did he do it? He did it because he focused on the character, not the winning. Right. Yeah. And Aaron talks about a lot of that stuff. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth when it comes to, anyone who is a student of Wooden, who firsthand, because I've got Wooden books out the wazoo, books that, talk about him and his philosophies, and I've learned a ton from those who are sharing his story. And I think that is important, because you want to learn from the best. And so anytime you can listen to somebody who's spoken directly with him, it just kind of verifies what you're reading. Sometimes I think the further you get away from somebody's life, you wonder, is what I'm reading actually true? Right. It sounds too good to be true, but when you can get, people who have sat with and talked to and lived with these great mentors, it justifies things a little bit. And not that you always need that, but it is helpful. But anybody like that, they can get firsthand knowledge of Wooden or any of these great coaches is fantastic. So enjoyed that connection with him, and just, it's amazing how small this world is of connectivity. Just even in the convention, people you run into or people you start to talk to, like, like Aaron, you said he's just throwing names around, like, oh yeah, so-and-so down the street, but it ends up being somebody that we all would love to sit down and have a cup of coffee with. Right. But I think that's what's great about these podcasts and these environments, is that we can continue to talk about different folks and their legacies. And just to reiterate too, I think it's important that we're learning from, this is how soccer explains leadership, but I think it is important that we're learning from other sports and other people that, I'm a big fan of Dan Gable, great wrestling coach. I've learned a ton from that environment. So I think that these are, let's not put off as soccer coaches that we can't learn from these other sports. I think there's some great stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So speaking of Wooden, Pyramid of Success is on the wall of a certain soccer coach on television, Ted Lasso, which we're going to now transition. How'd you like that segue, Paul? Was that pretty good?
That was good.
Yeah,
that was really good.
All right. So we will transition again. Episodes 9 and 10. We're gonna not quite do the treatment that we've done in the past, because as if you're looking at the timestamp on your podcast right now, you're like, all right, you guys are a half hour in. Are you going to go for 2 hours? We are not. We're going to just kind of run through these episodes a little quicker, but point out a few things from these episodes that I thought were pretty poignant. And so episode 9 was really the kind of Roy Kent transition episode. And really, I looked at it as the identity. His identity was really being formed in a way that, interestingly, hadn't been formed over his career, presumably, because he never saw himself as anything other than a soccer player or a football player, obviously, since it's England. Mm-hmm. So, it started out, with him in the ice bath, and he's sitting there, and Ted comes in and he says, you beating yourself up is like Woody Allen playing the clarinet, because Roy had a stretch of bad games. and kind of knew he was at the end. It was coming toward the end, but Ted said it's like Woody Allen playing the clarinet. I don't want to hear it. Knock it off. Go easy on yourself. And then Ted walked out saying, "Hey, I got your back. Ain't nothing going to change that." And that it was the start of this conversation that I saw. Ted and Keeley actually and Roy's niece were part of this, helping him understand that it's about more than just how you're playing on that field. It's just that you're a lot more than that. And so as they go through the episode, they do different things. But at the end, I don't know if you remember, but Keeley basically said, it's something along the lines of, it's just a game. He says, more than a game to me, Roy did. It's who I am. It's all I am. And that's when Keeley turned to Phoebe, his Roy's niece, and said, hey, Phoebe, who's your uncle or whatever? And she said a bunch of things, and none of them were a football player. What do you love about him? Didn't even mention the game. And so I think that's important for all of us, right? This idea of identity, who we are, right? It's not, if it's just a soccer player, then, and that's what you really think, then you're missing everything. If it's just a soccer coach, then you're missing the point, really, I believe. Right. So that's something that I thought was very, I think it hit pretty hard, really hard in this episode, and episode 10 as well. Because obviously in that episode, he hurt his knee and he saw that it was the end. And that's something that, you obviously have walked away from the head coach job, right? A lot of people walk away from the game. At some point, everyone will walk away from the game. So how do we instill in our players, who obviously are soccer players, and that is a part of their life, that it is about so much more than that, and it has to be about so much more than that, or it will end in, some sort of breakdown.
Yeah. We've talked about on this show quite a bit, that identity piece. And I think in this show we've watched Roy. I think we've seen this coming, right? Like from the beginning of Roy's the older player that at the beginning is kind of not really shepherding the younger player, but he sees himself in that younger player, how he was. And I think as I'm watching the show, I'm like, okay, this is going to come to a head at some point. He's at the end of his career. He's hard on himself. He doesn't really open himself up to anybody else. There's an identity crisis coming. And you just kind of see that developing out through the show. But I think as coaches, especially younger coaches, or coaching younger players, it happens at all levels. But I think, we've got to do our best not to allow that to happen, to where everything that we talk about with our kids is their athletic success. What are the things about the young people in your house even that, are great traits and attributes that we can praise them about, other than just like how they played or how they did in practice or how their game is going, or you got to do better if you're going to go to college. You got to, we can get so wrapped up in that when that's over for that kid, whenever it is, and like you said, it comes to an end at some point, it can be pretty tragic, or not being able to let it go when they need to, because they don't know anything else. Kind of mentioned about coaching. Hey, I don't know what else to be able to do. I hear that conversation a lot from coaches, but you hear from players too. I've sat with plenty of meetings of players like, I think I'm done, but I just don't know what else I'm going to do. And I think that's just years of just being beaten into their head that's all they're really about. I've always said that I'm a guy that coaches soccer, and now I'm not, which is an easier transition, that, hey, I'm a soccer coach, and that's all that I am, and I think we've got to change that perspective for people. And I think, or it's going to end up like Roy, where it hits pretty hard.
Yeah.
But fortunately for him, he's got people around him that care about him. They can help him transition in that. And I think that's another piece that not to lose sight of, is you may be the person on the other side that needs to be able to help somebody find, what they're truly about.
Yeah, definitely. All of these things are things we could talk about for hours, but I think that's a good place to leave that one. And you don't know which side of that crisis you're going to be on. So be prepared to be on both. I think it's very, very good word. There were a couple of things on the disc side of things, and we haven't talked about disc for a while, so I just wanted to bring it back up. One of the things was I loved it. He said in the press conference, he said, if you're an introvert, raise your hand. You got the next question, and all of them raised their hand. He said, that was a trick question. If you were an introvert, you would have been quiet as a field mouse. And I love that, because that is a good. I mean, if you're asking for hands to be raised, I mean, I use the story all the time when I was in Uganda, and we were doing a training, and I asked the question in the room, and I knew who were outgoing and who were reserved, and I said, who works with orphan and vulnerable kids, and no, like, only the people who were outgoing raised their hand, and everyone in the room did, and I was laughing. I was like, okay, people, this is a good example of the fact that you got to show you got to put yourself out there. So that was one, but the other was when Ted needed to bench Roy. I mean, it was pretty clear he just wasn't up to snuff, and he didn't want to, and that is something that Ted clearly is a high personality. He's outgoing, people focused, and that relationship to him is really, really important. And he did not want to ruin the relationship with Roy that he knew would be hurt if he benched him. And so, if you watch the episode, you could tell it was this internal tension of he knew it was the right thing to do, but he said it would ruin him. It would crush him. And I need to worry about the player. And then he said to Beard, and this is what I want to talk about, not so much the disc stuff, but when he sit at the bar with Beard, and he says, it's not all about winning. That's not how we measure success, is it? And Beard brought the reality that it does have to be a both and at that level, right? That jobs were at stake, that people's lives were at stake, that if they get relegated, it's completely different in the livelihoods of these people and the town and everyone. And May, the bartender, was like, I can't say exactly what she said, but she said, absolutely, you're right. Because Beard said, right, May? And she says, absolutely. And you could tell, and he basically said to Ted, you're being selfish. Again, because he didn't want to bench Roy. And that's something to remember, that if we go too far on the people side, then we are being selfish as a coach, because if we're that all relationship, and I have to remember that sometimes as a boss, I have to remember that sometimes the right thing to do is fire someone. And everything in my being does not want to fire them, because I'm thinking about their family. I could totally feel for Ted, because I had to do this at one point. One of the guys, like my brother, and I had to let him go because it was the right thing to do at that moment. And all I could think about as I'm talking to him is his little kids and his wife, and this is in Honduras. And I'm like, I know that it's 52% unemployment rate, and I know all these things, and it was so hard, and I was crushed. But I knew I had to do it. And some people could do that with snap of the fingers. All right, you're fired, you're gone, sorry. But for me, it was this internal, it was like this battle in me. And when I did it, it hurt. I still knew it was right, but it hurt. And it did hurt the relationship. And it's we've reconciled now, and we are brothers, not literally, but it's hard, right? So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's there's always that battle, especially if you're a relationship type person. There's always that battle of what's best for this person, and at what point does that interfere with what's best for the rest of the team or the rest of the culture or whatever. And there is a line where you can push it so far that what may benefit one really doesn't benefit the rest. So while you're trying to help one, you're hurting the other 30 or however many are on your team or in your group or in your environment. And there's a point where you've got to let that person go or whatever you need to do, move them on. And that's a tough thing as a coach. But I think one thing that Ted had done is he had built a relationship with Roy, and whether Roy realized it or not, maybe not up to that moment, but I think Roy realized that Ted did care about him, that it was probably a difficult decision. Now, how he handled it and all that is different initially, but it probably made it easier long-term because he had built some relationship there. And I think that's important as coaches. And I've seen that for myself when I've gotten to the point where I've had to let a kid go or whatever. it wasn't easy. And maybe the reason you were able to reconcile with yours too, because there was some relationship there. It was like, okay, this isn't, it's not personal, but it's what's best. You're part of a team, you're part of a group. It's what's best for everybody. May not be what's best for you. Now, in the long run, maybe it is best for that person. Maybe they need to learn some lessons or whatnot, but it's difficult. And there's times I'm envious of those who can just like rip the Band-Aid off and move on. Not really, I don't ever want to be that way, but
Right.
sometimes like, man, I wish I could just rip the Band-Aid off this thing and move past it, but that's not how I'm wired. But it was interesting to see how that character development kind of played through with Roy, and how Ted struggled with that decision. But again, he surrounded himself with people that can help him do hard things, where Beard is like, you got to do it. I mean, I've had my assistants at times are like, hey, I'm glad I'm not the head coach, but this is the right thing. You need to go do that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. No. And like you said, I mean, that's why it is important to surround ourselves with those people who can do those things. And that's actually, at that point, I had my COO who was wired. I mean, if it was him, he would have gone and just said, we got to let you go.
Yeah.
And he would have been fine. He would have walked on, and he would have, known that it might affect the relationship, but that's what had to be done for the bottom line. That's what had to be done for the, and I should have known, working for a law firm, that bottom line ruled there, but that was never, it was never okay to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to have, like, it has to be a both and. It has to be a balance. We have to live in that tension. But if we're by ourselves having to do that, we probably won't do it if we don't have the people around us. Like Ted would not have done it if Beard wasn't pushing him there. Right. And so we need to surround ourselves with those people who will not only people who think differently from us, but people who we have that trust with, where if he didn't have that trust with Beard, Beard wouldn't have told him. May wouldn't have told Ted if Beard didn't say it and ask. She was thinking it, obviously, but wouldn't have said it because the trust wasn't there. It hadn't been built. That relationship wasn't there. She didn't earn that conversation. So that's really, really important to be thinking about as well. So, all right, a couple more things, then we'll wrap this episode up. But from episode 10, one of the things I wanted to talk about is this idea of Rebecca was talking to Ted, and they were freaking out about this Man City game, or Ted was, and how were they going to play, and they had to win to not be relegated. And he said, there's no way we can beat this team. They're way better than us. And she said, well, every disadvantage has an advantage. And she said, can't you take the fact that you know nothing about this game and use it to your advantage? And that, it reminds me of this idea of everything has a shadow, right? So every good thing has a side of it. So like the internet has a lot of great to it, but it also has tremendous evil, right? This idea of Ted not knowing anything. And obviously it's silly. I mean, they do the Lasso special where they basically a football play. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous, but it's this concept though, that is a truth, that we often just see the bad. We often just see the negative. We often just see the downside of it. We see the dark side of that shadow, and we don't look at, okay, what benefit can this bring? What positive can come out of this? What is the good side of this? Just because the internet has bad things doesn't mean you shut it down. It means you make it better. Right. And so these are these concepts that came out of that for me. And how we, again, going back to innovation happens when people see things differently than the way it's always been done, and they use it for their advantage. And so I don't know, what do you take away from that?
Yeah, I think you've got to have that perspective as a leader. I remember when we came to Baylor, and they hadn't had a winning season in, gosh, I think 9 years prior, and some of the drawbacks that we were hearing was, well, they've lost for a long time. They don't have a winning perspective. It's a Christian school. It's hard to recruit to. And we took that as like, well, that's one of the reasons we want to go there. It's a Christian school. Those are the types of kids that we want to recruit and mentor. So we took what a lot thought was a disadvantage and flipped it and said, and we built a program around those values that people thought were disadvantages. They became a lot of our core values of what we built the program on. So I think it's also important to know the environment you're stepping into. And, but you're right. I think you've got to think, outside the box a lot of times. even when you're building a program or creating a culture or whatever, you've got to see, you've got to see what others don't see. And you've got to see that other side of the coin. You've got to see, those things that you can step into that, people might see as a weakness that you can take and make it an advantage and a strength. And, that's, in the story, is probably the only reason that, Ted's had any success. It wasn't his soccer knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that he was this great soccer brain. It was the other side of the coin. It was that team didn't necessarily need a soccer coach. They needed someone that could build a culture. Yep. They needed culture building. They needed people that poured into them. They weren't the greatest soccer players either, but they became better than they could have been individually because he was able to build a culture, and they stood more on that to become more successful. And I think as we were watching the episode, Marcy and I were kind of laughing because we see the Ted Lasso special and we kind of look at each other at the same time. We're like, I think we could pull that off. We're those coaches. We're like, I think we could pull that off. We're just crazy enough to try that.
So. Yeah. That's funny. No, and I want to end with the way the season ended. With it wasn't quite the end. It was close to the end. But it showed this contrast of Jamie in the, I don't know if it was the locker room. It was some room in the back of the stadium. And Ted was about to go in and probably give him the note that Beard ended up giving him later. And his dad was railing into him about, why didn't you take the shot? You could have been the hero. You could have scored. And it showed the impact of an unhealthy father. Or, I mean, you could say lack of a father too, but it was really an unhealthy father in a kid's life. And you see again, the character development in the show is fantastic. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes it's obvious, but this is more the obvious brand. But you see Jamie is who he is. A lot of, so much of it very likely comes out of that. His dad is saying, you need to be the hero. You need to be the guy who's the limelight. You are the best. It's personality style. That's part of it, but what's being poured in is going to come out. As my wife says, when you're squeezed, what juice comes out, right? Like, and that's going to be so much of what goes into you. What how are you nurtured? Some of it's it's nature and nurture, right? And so, but then to contrast that with the end when Beard walks up to Jamie getting on the bus, gives him the note from Ted, and all it says is, way to make the extra pass, Ted. And because Jamie kept thinking Ted was playing head games because he was speaking highly of him and speaking as, I love Jamie. Jamie, he's I appreciate him. He's a great player. He's, incredible talent. He's this and that. And Jamie kept thinking he was playing head games. And then he gets that note and he realizes it wasn't head games. He actually cares because he didn't have that growing up. Right. And that really struck me. I mean, from obviously the human element, but also because I work with orphan and vulnerable kids all over the place. And to see that that's so many of them, that's their story. And they don't have the people pouring into them. So how can we come around them? And to see the impact that Ted had on Jamie, obviously you see in season 2 a little bit more, but how can we not only give these kids a chance, because he obviously had the chance and he was taking it and he was doing really well, but he was empty. Right. And you could see that little note, that 10 words or whatever, probably made more impact on him than many, many, many words his dad had ever, like in a positive way. So that was something that I thought, man, this is so powerful. And it was just this quiet scene. There were no words spoken, and yet it spoke a million. So what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that we've talked about this on the show quite a bit too, is that, as coaches, sometimes we kind of play the role of a primary parent in a kid's life. They may not have that at home, or at least, in a lot of ways, a secondary parent. You're another voice of reason. You're a voice of caring. You're a nurturer. You're a mentor. And you don't really know what impact you're going to have on somebody. Even Ted with Jamie, he was pouring into him from the beginning and got nothing really but pushback. But he knew that that's what Jamie needed, and he was going to do it no matter what. and made a massive impact on him and his life, because he was probably abrasive to it because it wasn't natural, it wasn't normal, it didn't feel right to Jamie. But he kind of liked it, but didn't want to open himself up, because you're opening yourself up for disaster. You think in your own mind, but I think as coaches or leaders, we've got to remember, what kind of impact we're leaving on people we don't even know sometimes. So I thought it was a great finish to that season as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So as we finish up this halftime show, do you have any parting words for our audience? Any recommendations, any things that you have that you want to leave with them?
No, I'm just really excited about where we're going, where next season is taking us with these interviews, and just encourage folks to continue to lean into each other as resources, as we're trying to be a resource for you. You're a resource for us as well. As you said, a lot of these guests come from our other connections, whether it's through this podcast or other things that we're doing, but we're all resources for each other and helping each other get better. I know Phil and I are that for each other, but are also doing this so that we can connect and learn ourselves. So appreciate everybody who's participating in this.
And so do I. And I express that every show. I don't just, they aren't just words. I'm very grateful for each and every one of you who listen, because you're obviously learning, and you have that learning posture. And so, as Paul just said, like, your resources to us. So reach out to us. Paul gave his email earlier, pajobson@gmail.com. Mine, Phil, at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. Reach out to us, share guests with us, share thoughts with us. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. If you have questions about coaching the bigger game, or Warrior Way, or the consulting stuff that Paul's talking about doing, reach out and ask the questions and see if it's a fit for you. And we won't do any hard sells. If it's a fit, it's a fit. If it's not, it's not. And that's the reality. We know we have things that can help, and we want to help. We want to be able to serve you and to be able to help you to flourish, and so that you can help the people that are on your teams. If you're running a business, that we can help you flourish. We can help your people flourish. That's why we do what we do. And those aren't just words. It's not just a sales pitch. That's the reality. It's what Paul and I do, and what we love doing. And so please reach out. You can connect with us also on the Facebook group, How Soccer Explains Leadership Facebook group. You can ask questions there, and we will get back to you. We will answer them, and we will definitely have that conversation with you. Last thing, again, the Coaching the Bigger Game program will be launching in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in that, please go fill out the form at coachingthebiggergame.com. Would love to be able to get you into that first class. We're going to have some from introductory rates and things like that will go away if you aren't part of the initial group. So we would love for you to be able to do that. And I would love more than anything for listeners of this show to be able to be a part of that. So, and also, if you listen to this and it can help others, share it with them. Don't just assume they'll find it somewhere, because there's millions literally of podcasts out there, and hundreds of thousands starting every week, I think is what it is. It's kind of crazy. So share it with others. Don't just post it on social media and expect that they're going to see it. Send them an email, drop them a text, say, hey, I listened to this episode. I thought of you. That will mean a lot to them as well, because it shows that you're thinking about it and you care about their development as well. So we just want to be able to help you learn, help others learn that are in your path. And we really do. I say this every episode, and I mean it. I really hope that you're taking what you're learning from this, and it's helping you to be a better leader, helping you to be a better spouse, a better parent, a better leader in your community. And, most of all, maybe not most of all, I always say most of all, but I don't know if it's most of all. It's super important. I do hope that you take what you learned from this, and it reminds you that soccer and most sports, as we learned with Aaron Locks and Cheryl McCormick, really do explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.